You know, it's been a little bit frozen around here, and I always like to tell my colleagues in Washington that it is true that Minnesota was colder than Mars, but it was only one day, and it was International Falls. So just remember that. And the Range Rover was in a really warm part of Mars. So I am just, what Diane has done here, where are you, Diane? Where did you go? Right there, is an incredible thing, to be the first city to devote a day of recognition to our Vietnam vets, to think that one person could do this and get this started all in the honor of her brother Skip, and that his life and his spirit lives on, and that you didn't just take your grief and just hold it in, that you used it in a way that was so positive for so many other veterans is really an incredible act of public service. So thank you so much for that, Diane. And looking back at Skip's story, just so you know, I'm going to try to stay, I always stay at the end of things, but I have in Fairview Hospital, they've done some groundbreaking work on mental health. So I'm meeting with some of their doctors and everyone about the mental health issue, and I know you lost your brother to suicide in the end after he served, and I think we need to put more focus on this, certainly for our veterans. So if I'm leaving a little early, it's for a very, very good reason. And I also want to acknowledge Dale with the Washington County Veterans Services, Susan, who we just heard from. I love that loud voice. And then, of course, a friend and family of Tom Tessito, who we're going to hear about today. What a story he has. And we lost him in 2007, but his story is worth learning about and remembering. It is with grateful hearts that we come today to honor our Vietnam vets. I think we all know that when our Vietnam vets came home, they didn't get the kind of greeting that they deserved. Instead of getting cheering crowds, they got tomatoes. And so for so many of them, it was something that they never forgot. And it is something that I feel that we owe an obligation to them to do better. I'll never forget being at, the Serving Our Troops events that we do in Minnesota, where a lot of restaurants, particularly in St. Paul, came together and decided to make a steak dinner for our troops in Kuwait, Afghanistan, wherever they were, at the same time that they served that dinner to them in the field. So they literally would make 10,000 steaks, some for their families, and then they hook them up with videos so that they can talk to them. If you think this happens in other states, it doesn't. And I'd often go to those events and volunteer and talk to people, and about a few years ago I was at the one in St. Paul, and a guy had a Vietnam vet cap on, and I said, "Oh, thank you for volunteering, it's so great." And he says, "Well, no, I'm here for a reason, because this never happened when we came home, and this never happened when we were serving, and I just want to make sure how we were treated never happens to someone else again." And I think if there is any silver lining to what happened, I think people now understand. You think about how we're treating our veterans now, and it's not perfect, but it is so much better. For the veterans who fought so bravely in Afghanistan and Iraq, a lot of that happened, how we treat them with the increase in health care, with the things that we've done with the benefits, which we just had a little slip back but fixed a few months ago. Those things happened because of our Vietnam vets, because they stood up for their brothers and sisters who fought in these wars and said, we can't let this happen again. So thank you for that. You not only served our country in Vietnam, but you made sure that those who served after you got the respect and dignity that they deserved. So thank you for that. When we think about these veterans, I think their stories are important. We think of people like Tom, who was wounded twice in action, earning Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Hearts, and a Bronze Star. He was a squad leader and knocked out 4 enemy bunkers in a fight to rescue a wounded soldier. He was a model citizen, as you all know. He coached football and hockey and was a volunteer firefighter for 20 years. That's an example of a veteran, not just serving overseas, but then coming home and serving our state. Steve Dufek, someone that we honored recently. He was a longtime Forest Lake resident and member of this Legion post. He was wounded in Vietnam, still had shrapnel in his body until the day he died. He wasn't awarded a Purple Heart at the time because of a clerical error. In addition to everything else with our Vietnam vets, there were all these kinds of problems with errors because there were so many people wounded or who died that didn't get honored the way they should. And he was too humble to pursue it. His whole life, he didn't do anything about it. His family kind of knew about it and it just sat there. And it wasn't until he was diagnosed with terminal cancer that he let his family right this wrong. And they reached out to our office. We worked together, and last summer, and we lost him. But posthumously, we awarded Stephen Dufek the Purple Heart with literally like 50 family members at my side, remembering his memory, including a bunch of really sweet grandchildren. So that's what we try to do now. And I don't think it's going to make up for how people were treated, but it's as Diane knows, certainly a duty that we have and something worth doing. Service isn't about where or when you fought. It's about the fact that you answered this call when your country needed you, even at great personal risk and for little personal reward. That's what Stephen did, that's what Tom did, that's what Skip did, that's what all our Vietnam veterans did. So I thought I'd talk a little bit, because we're focused on remembering those who were prisoners of war or having been missing in action. As you know, I still meet with families that come to my office who still haven't found their loved one. It's not something that just happened in the past and got fixed. We still have not found the remains of a number of the people. And the experience of these veterans and their families are especially harrowing and difficult to speak about. And that's where it really came to me, was when Senator McCain invited me to go with him to Vietnam. We have been friends. He actually came to my swearing-in party last year, which my dad loved. It was cool. And spoke at my swearing-in party. And we really got to be friends on this trip when he and Lindsey Graham and I went on this trip to Asia. There were really two focuses. One was still in the POW MIA issue in Vietnam, and the second, we also went to Hong Kong and Japan. It was about our businesses and trade and things. We were trying to get them buying our stuff when we were visiting and meeting with the chambers and other things. And you should also know this was just, I think, 3 or 4 months after McCain had lost the election to President Obama. And he would literally open the newspaper every day. He's such a man of great wit and so forgiving, but he would open it was when Obama was at his most popular height, and he would open the paper and would go, "Oh, the Obamas bought a dog," like that. So we went to Vietnam. And our first stop was the lake where he had been shot down, and there's a statue there actually honoring it, and he always jokes that he has to like clean it off, like there's bird stuff on it and everything. But when you look at that lake and you think about right there in the middle of Hanoi where he was shot down, even back then, he was in the middle of the town, and he barely survived and was completely in enemy hands and was dragged, injured off of that plane. And so then we went to the prison where he had been held for those 8 years. And when you hear his stories, and he told me on this trip, but he also actually spent an hour telling the entire Senate last year about what happened to him in details that I don't think he's revealed publicly, but just of the torture and the fact that he actually was going to be allowed to be released. I don't know if you all know this, and then he said no, and he let someone else go in his place. And he was just never giving up in terms of not giving in to the people that were his captors. Well, when we went back to the prison, they actually have two sides of the prison. The Vietnamese have made still a communist country, although changing, and I think some exciting things ahead. And John McCain is like a rock star when we go there, because people know that he has continued to visit the country, that he wants to build trade and have good relations there, and they also know that he has forgiven many people. And it's an amazing sight to walk down the streets with him, because everyone knows who he is. They know he worked on this POW issue. So we go in the prison, and they have two sides of the prison. One is where the Vietnamese had been captive themselves to the French. And that's a very dark side, and that makes it very, very scary and very sad and grievous. Then you get to the side where the Vietnamese themselves had held the Americans. And to put it nicely, they sort of make it into a positive thing, which according to McCain, and I think everyone knows this, it really wasn't. They have big blown up pictures on the wall of like the GIs playing tennis, table tennis, and gathered around a Christmas tree and other things. And it was really quite something to see. And we had about 100 reporters sort of following behind us on this trip, and with a very sweet guide. And so she would say, well, here the prisoners are playing tennis or gathering around the Christmas tree. And McCain would go, oh, very nice, very nice. And then we'd walk away and he'd whisper to me, I don't remember that, like that. And then we got to the place, this glass case, where they had his flight suit, and this was a new exhibit. Of course, I wasn't the first one with him when he visited this prison, as you know. He's visited before, and so it wasn't quite as emotional as the first time that he visited, but this was a new exhibit. And it had allegedly had his flight suit in it. And it was in perfect, pristine condition with his name embroidered on it, and then next to it, was a picture of when he was shot down, and you could just see with your own eyes it was totally torn up, and because he was shot and they were taking him out of that lake. And so they go, Senator McCain, this is our new exhibit with your flight suit. And he says, oh, very, very nice, thank you so much, thank you so much. And then we walk away and he goes, that was not my flight suit. For me, seeing him and having him keep reminding me with those words, that's not quite how I remember my time here, is an amusing story, but I think it's also a very serious issue. In the US military, there's a common saying, leave no man behind. But we know in fact that there are 1,642 Americans who remain unaccounted for, who never returned home from Southeast Asia, including 33 Minnesotans. 33 Minnesotans. Some 847 nationwide and 15 Minnesotans have been reported killed in action, though remains have never been returned. Others are presumed dead but have never been found. Our country must remain committed to bringing them all home, and I share the concerns of many of you, as well as my colleagues in the Senate, that the Defense Department's efforts to achieve this goal have not been quite adequate. And I'm committed to seeing what we can continue to do to make this effort more effective so that we can bring closure to families who have lacked it for far too long. We do have a growing economic relationship with Vietnam that Senator McCain supports, that I think is very important. In fact, when we were there, he gave a speech about it at one of the universities. And I'm hopeful that that's going to continue to improve our relations so we can continue to work on the MIA-POW issue so we can get all the information. We still hear every year of more and more people, either the remains or information being uncovered, and we want to continue this work. So today is about honoring our Vietnam veterans, and I do want to thank Representative Detmer for his work on this memorial, and also thank Senator Housley for being here. I see you behind the flag somewhere, as well as all of your local representatives. And it's about remembering these veterans and keeping our promises to them. I always think about the fact when our soldiers signed up, there wasn't a waiting line, and when they come home to this country and they need a job, or they need education, or they need a house, there should never be a waiting line in the United States of America. And that's why we've worked so hard to expand healthcare programs to recognize the needs of those who served in Vietnam. With Iraq, we had so many new veteran soldiers coming back who needed help, and it was actually pushing out the beds for those that had served in other conflicts. And it was very important that we expanded that, and we all know with what happened at Walter Reed that we had some real issues with the kinds of facilities we had for our veterans. We also established the Yellow Ribbon Program, thanks to Governor Pawlenty's leadership, that has been actually a model that then Senator Coleman and I took out nationally, and now helping in other states for our Guard and Reserve and people that can't just go back to a base. They're going back to little towns all over Minnesota, and it's a lot harder for them if they have mental health issues, if they need a job, to find out, for their leadership to find out they need help, and that's the whole idea behind the Yellow Ribbon Program. We need to do more. We need to provide our veterans with employment. We still, even though we've made improvements, actually have a higher unemployment rate for our vets that have served in these recent wars than we do for civilians. And that's just wrong. And part of it is because they left a job when the economy was better, and now they've come back, and while we've seen great improvements in Minnesota, it's not the way it was when they left or their job vanished. And so that's why I am so pleased a lot of our companies have stepped up and said they're going to make it a priority for hiring our veterans. So that's what we've been working on, but today is really about making sure that we've taken that Vietnam experience and tried to make things better.